Hello and welcome back to the Nourish with Purpose podcast. I hope you are having a great start to your week and happy Wednesday. We're already halfway through the week and I just hope that you felt really centered this week, felt very aligned with what you're doing, and overall just very content. I feel like we're always constantly on a roller coaster, right? Whether that's emotions or our job or what's happening around us, our house, our environment. And so I really hope this week you've just felt content and at ease with where you are. Today I'm going to keep the catch up pretty short because a lot of what I'm talking about today is actually what I've done the past week. But before we get started, I would ask if you're enjoying this podcast that you would just give it a rating and or review on either Spotify or Apple Podcasts. And if you do, go ahead and screenshot that and send it to me through Instagram or Facebook or text, and I'll get you entered into the Wellness Bundle giveaway. And today I'm actually sharing what is going to be in that giveaway because I know when you want to sign up for something, you probably want to know what you're getting. So it's going to include a 5-minute journal, the Cocoa Kind skincare that I use and love, my favorite juice plus protein powder, a Natural Grocers, Trader Joe's, or Whole Foods gift card, and my anti-inflammatory recipe guide. I'm also going to include a custom sweatshirt done by Simply Stitched, and so far that is what I have that will be included in there. I'm sure I will be adding things, but those were the top of my head, things that I knew I wanted to give to somebody else because they've been crucial in my own wellness journey. So getting into the catch-up, because a bulk of today's episode is what I'm talking about, I won't get too much into it, but the last Tuesday, we celebrated Nate's birthday. Nate is my husband, and so I had family over for supper. We did sourdough pizza crusts, pizzas, and it was honestly so delicious. And it was really fun because I could use a lot of my garden produce, and I roasted a chicken and used that on the pizza, and then I made chicken bone broth. Just really felt kind of like I was in my homemaker era for a little bit there. I made some sourdough bread for us to take on our trip, and I made some homemade sourdough cinnamon rolls. And so it was all just really fun for me, a good way to use up what I have before we left. While I had family over, it was really cute because my grandparents were sharing stories about their first house. And because we're kind of in the process of renovating our own house, there's just a lot that needs to be done, and it all takes way longer than you think it's going to be. And so I think Nate and I both get pretty overwhelmed with what there is to do sometimes. Our kitchen is a complete disaster. But my grandparents were talking about how when they had their first house, they actually had honey dripping through the light in their upstairs bedroom because the bees had made hives in their walls and in their attic. And so my grandma was joking how she would always tell my grandpa he should take one of his 2-bakes, which is a German way of saying like a roll, a dinner roll, and put it under the light and get honey on his 2-bake. And so it was just really cute because they were sharing stories of their first house, and I looked at Nate and I'm like, see, it could be so much worse. Like we could have honey dripping from our lights, but we don't. And very grateful to be in the house we're in right now. It's truly exactly what I wanted. Growing up, I wanted a front porch and I wanted an old farmhouse, and that's exactly what it is. But again, sometimes when you've got so many projects that you need to do and you don't feel like you always have the time to do it, or you can't do it yourself, it gets a little bit overwhelming. But I think right now we're in a good spot. We feel content. You know, the more you look at something that's disorganized, the more normal it seems to appear. Like a lot of our bedrooms don't have any trim around the floor or the closets. And I don't really even notice it anymore. I'm sure when people come into my house, they think it looks like chaos. Hopefully it doesn't. Hopefully we've done a good job of making it look very clean and put together. But, you know, there are just the things you can't control. So really accepting that, but it was fun to have, like I had said, my family, my grandparents, my parents over, and just hear their stories, because my grandparents, as they share the stories of their first house, it just makes you really reflect on your first house, like what our first house that we have right now, and just super grateful for the house we have. It is old, like it's a little over 100 years old, but it's in really great shape and we got really lucky with it. So moving into the portion of today's episode of how I am nourishing my mind, body, and spirit. How I'm nourishing my body is I actually ran the half marathon last Monday. I've been talking about it for a while, told you I didn't want to be held accountable because I wasn't quite sure I could do it, but I did it. And not to brag in any way, but I'm just really proud of myself for that, because I absolutely hated running. Now I really enjoy it. But I also had an 8:54 average mile pace. And that just felt really good, because going into it, I just wanted my average miles to be under 9. And I was able to do that. So I felt really proud of myself for that, really accomplished. I didn't do any sort of run. I just went out and did it, because Nate was like, okay, like you've been training long enough, like why don't you just go get it over with? And I'm like, okay, you're right. So he biked alongside me as I ran in the country, and that was just a really great day. Felt really great about that. But I also hurt my knee when I was doing that. And if you've followed me on social media, you would see like we were hiking this past week. And so after hurting my knee, I was a little bit worried about hiking, but it was actually pretty comfortable because my knee could be bent the whole time we were hiking. But yeah, I was definitely hobbling for a few days there. So taking a little bit of time off of that and just focusing on getting strength built back up, because as I started running, I lifted still probably 3 to 4 days a week, but I just felt like with the combination of lifting and running, I wasn't building strength like I had wanted. So I'm focusing back on that now. How I am nourishing my mind is I started using the weekly journal by Wild House Paper. They are at Wild House Paper on Instagram if you want to check them out. But it's already been such a great way for me to really organize my thoughts and set very specific intentions for the week. So I got the weekly planner, and so the first day you set, not even the first day, but before the week starts, you set an overview of your goals, your intentions, what has to get done that week. And then you start to reflect day by day. And I really, really have been loving that. I'm really trying to get back into meal prepping and meal planning, which I've been really bad about since we moved from Omaha. And I don't really know why. I just think in the summer when you have garden produce and you can't really estimate when you're going to have it, you start to grocery shop a little bit less because you don't want to buy things you don't need, but at the same time, you don't know when you're going to have produce ready. So I've just really been inconsistent with that. And so using that weekly guide is what I'm hoping is going to help keep me on track for that meal planning. How I'm nourishing my spirit is truthfully just being out in nature this last week and being in the present moment. When you look into the evolution of like the Grand Tetons, which is where we were like near Jackson Hole, it's really insane to know that God's hand has played a part in all of that, and how just those landmarks have evolved over time. It's just super fascinating to me. I was telling Nathan, I'm like, maybe I should have been an archaeologist, but then again, like I'm not quite sure what that would have done for me living here in Nebraska. But I was also the kid too, side note, but that would collect so many rocks. And I would always think like I'd see a rock on a walk and I would be like, oh my gosh, that's such a cool rock. And I would literally have jars of rocks, and they were the most average rocks, but to me, there was something special in them that I just loved. And so when we were there, I was like, I've always had such a fascination for rocks, and these are just rocks on like a massive scale. But when I was younger too, I just remember my mom, I'd have so many jars of rocks that she would just take a jar and throw it into the yard and get rid of them. And I didn't know that until I was much older. But I just remember like my rocks would go missing and then I'd have to collect more. And I would just continue to fill up jars and jars of rocks. So it's obviously something that's always been super fascinating to me. I don't know if anybody else was a rock kid, but I was definitely a rock kid. I hunted for those things, and that was like a prized possession when I could find a really cool rock. But anyway, very side tangent of that. But Today we are talking about why travel is an important part of your health, how you can ball on a budget, also the Jackson Hole and Yellowstone guide, and details that you need for a really health supporting trip. So, there is a difference in my mind between a trip and a vacation. So, Nate and I prefer to go on trips. A trip is where you're pretty active, you are planning a lot of things while you're there, you're probably nourishing your body really well and moving your body a lot, trying to stay really busy and do as much as you can in a pretty short amount of time. On the other hand, a vacation for us is like laying on the beach. We probably move our body a little bit less, eat a little bit more, don't try to do anything too intense. And so those are the two differences. What I'm talking about today is a trip. So a trip is where, you're very active, you are doing a lot of different things. And that's because that's what we love and that's what we have noticed makes us feel the best physically and mentally. So a vacation, yes, is relaxing, but for us, we would rather just see a lot of really cool monuments and physically feel really good and not like we've just been laying around for the last week and eating a lot of food. We like to rather go on a trip. So because travel is so important for your health, I want to list a few reasons why, right? So regardless of if you love the house you have, the town you live in, the job you have, your family, etc., getting away is always so good for your health and nourishing for your soul. So it allows you to meet new people, you get to see new places, and kind of reset your mind and your body for maybe the month ahead. You're also really forced to get away from any responsibilities you have at home, so we have cortisol, right? And if our cortisol levels are really high, our stress hormone, which is also known as our stress hormone, that's activated. If that is always very elevated because you live in a high stress environment, that can really weigh on you and become really taxing for your health, right? And so if you're noticing that more than ever right now, maybe the best thing for you or, the people around you would be for you to get away. It's also really great for building the relationships with either your partner or your friend. And, while I was there, I wouldn't say my job is super high stress. I mean, it definitely has its moments, but I didn't bring my laptop, which is like my primary source of work, right? I can get on my email, get on my website very easily, but I didn't bring that with me. And so I had to do just minimal work on my phone while I was there. But with not having my computer, that was already such a weight lifted off of me because I knew regardless of how tempted I was to work, I really couldn't. Same with my husband. He didn't bring his computer or anything. And we're the couple that brings our backpacks with us everywhere. Like I will bring my backpack and my work computer and my planner with me everywhere. Same with him. We call it like our security backpacks. It's because we both really enjoy our jobs, I would say, and it can be really hard to step away from work, especially in my position where I am running my own business. I am the sole person. I don't have anybody else to help me. There's no responsibilities I can delegate to anybody else. So if something pops up, it's on me to do that. And I think having my laptop is just, like I had said, it's kind of security that if I needed to handle something, I could. But I didn't even bring that with me. And I didn't need it, and it was truly just a great time for us to reset and spend time intentionally together because when we get back home, our schedules, I wouldn't say they're super crazy, but we don't see each other a lot throughout the day, and in the evenings, there's other things being planned. So it's a good time for you to grow closer to the person you're traveling with. You can also be as physically active as you'd like to be, right? So you don't have any other commitments that are pulling you away. I could see maybe if you're traveling with your kids, that could be a little bit different, but including them in with a physical activity, right? When you're at home, it's easy to say, well, I have to make supper, or I have to work a little bit later tonight. I have a call. I can't move my body. But when you're on a trip, especially a trip that is really intended for physical activity, right? Regardless of if you're hiking or if you're just in Yellowstone National Park, you're still moving your body. There's a lot of walking that's included there. And so, you're able to really focus on that rather than everything else going on around you. You're also able to try new foods and really nourish your body really well. When we travel, we typically pack food with us, which is what I'm going to talk about next, but we pack our food, we eat breakfast and lunch packed, and then we will go out for supper and probably get like an ice cream, or at least I will get ice cream after the supper. And so when we do that, we're able to eat the nourishing foods that we've packed, and then for supper, we still eat good food because you'll notice a lot of places you travel tend to have restaurants that source locally. And so I would say that's something we definitely look for when we travel, or anything that's just very high quality. We don't like to get a lot of greasy foods or, those comfort foods. Those are great sometimes, but most of the times we want to try something that has been sourced locally or is just a really high quality supper. And so now moving into food, part of what I'm talking about is how to make travel feel very affordable. So both it can, increase your health, but also decrease your stress, because I know finances can be tight. Vacations and trips can be really, really expensive, but what I'm telling you today is hopefully encouraging you and assures you that you can do this pretty cost effectively if getting away for even 4 days. That's how long our trip was. Getting away for 4 days, if that's just what you need, then I want you to rest assured that that's something financially that you might be able to make work. Okay, so when it comes to food, I really try to pack as many health supporting snacks as I can. And so what this would look like for us on this last trip, I made sourdough bread, I packed applesauce packets, I got some fruit, so I had plums, apples, and bananas, packed my chocolate date bars, Chomps beef sticks, then we got deli ham and turkey, I packed my natural peanut butter and dried mango. So a lot of snacks that I would typically consume throughout the week at home that would support my health, I packed with me, because I'm not somebody who, when I go on a trip, I like to just let loose and eat whatever and do whatever, because I notice that physically I don't feel my best when I do that. This also meant that I consistently was taking my Symbiotic Plus and my reishi supplement, right? So really gut supporting, brain supporting supplements that I knew would continue to help me feel my best while I was traveling. And so, like I said, we eat breakfast and lunch with the food we packed, then we go out for supper. I also really try to focus on eating a lot of protein on a trip because we're pretty physically active. One day we hiked 172 flights of stairs and had over 30,000 steps. And that was the night that we went out and we got chili burgers, which I do have a photo of that. Maybe I'll post it. It looks repulsive, but it was delicious and extremely high in protein. And that is what we did after that, because we're like, we have been so physically active today, like we need to up the protein. And so we both got chili burgers. But again, that's the difference between a vacation and a trip, right? You're very physically active on a trip, so supporting your body with good food is really important. And when you pack food, it also lowers the cost of your trip as well. So traveling, I know, can be really expensive, but it doesn't have to be. So I'm going to give you our trip summary of our trip we took this last week. We went to Jackson, Wyoming, and then we went to West Yellowstone and Yellowstone Park. So we left Henderson it was about 9 p.m. We actually ended up driving through the night, which we had 2 people, so that is why we did that. One could drive, one could sleep. I ended up driving most of the way, and honestly, I felt pretty rested. Like, I wasn't that tired. That is a little bit higher risk, so I'm not saying that you should or shouldn't do that, but that is what we did because we wanted to get the most out of the limited amount of time that we had there. So from Henderson, we drove to Riverton, Wyoming, and that was honestly the most perfect little town. We ended up sleeping in our car that night, so we rolled in about 5 a.m. or 4 a.m. We slept until about 8 a.m., 7:30 or 8 a.m. And we went to Walmart. That's where we got our groceries and a cooler. And so I would recommend bringing a cooler. We didn't have one, so we ended up having to buy one that was bear-proof and would hold ice for up to 5 days, which was pretty crazy. But all of the groceries without the cooler was about $50. And so that lasted us all 4 days, the food we bought there. So that is where you can see too, $50 for food for 4 days versus if you go out to eat for every single meal, that's really, really quickly going to add up. I know our first night when we ate at Jackson Hole, we ate at the Roadhouse Pub and Grill, I believe is what it was called. And that alone was about $60. So that is where, of course, if you can, I would recommend packing food. It's also convenient because you don't have to stop and constantly get food, and obviously pay the money, but also make time to go get food. You just have it with you at all times. And so if you need a snack, you can grab it. It's just very convenient. So from that, we woke up, went to Walmart, and then we went to get coffee at the Brown Sugar Coffee Roastery. Really good. I got a maple latte. It was delicious. And then we got on the road. So then from there, we drove to the Grand Teton National Park, and we stopped at the Jackson Lake Dam, walked around just a little bit, and then we drove to the Grand Teton National Park and ate the lunch that we had packed with the food that we brought. We also went to buy bear spray, and this is going to be a little side story, but if you are thinking about doing a trip, you should know this. So we went to go buy bear spray in the park, Grand Teton, and the guy working the cash register, he was asking us, well, do you know how to use this? We're like, yeah, we've read up on it. My friends told me we should get it. He's like, okay, because you're absolutely going to need to use this. And he's like, and by the way, it is also cubbing season. So even if you do encounter a black bear and she's with her cubs, if you spray her, it's probably not going to be effective because you're instantly seen as a target. So at that point, it's probably best to just curl into a ball and protect your organs. And Nathan and I left that. We were like, oh my gosh, like we're going to die on this trip. I want to take a quick break to talk about something very near and dear to my heart, one-on-one coaching. Through my signature coaching program, Nourish to Flourish, I work with women to not only focus on decreasing their overall inflammation, but healing their relationship with food and doing the necessary mindset work to make those changes long-lasting. If you're looking to improve the way you feel and truly make changes that last a lifetime by identifying your exact source of inflammation, finding health-improving recipes that align with your goals, grocery shop with a nutrition coach, and be gracefully guided along the way, then this program is for you. Inflammation shows up in various ways such as brain fog, fatigue, stress, chronic pain, general discomfort, headaches, constipation, frequent trips to the restroom, bloating, anxiety, weight gain, abdominal pain, restless sleep. You can really see that the source of all disease is inflammation. But I want to reassure you that it doesn't have to be this way. You can learn more by going to my website, which will be linked below in the show notes. Feel good in your skin, never count calories again, heal your relationship with food, and let's nourish to flourish. Like, we were both so scared. We went to go start a hike, and then we turned around and psyched ourselves out of it. I texted my friends, Danny and Katie. They had both been in that area this last month as well, and just kind of freaking out. Like, okay, are we gonna see a bear? Because I don't think we're mentally prepared for this. And after that, both my friends were like, no, like you might see a bear, but it's fine. Like, you use your bear spray if you need to. Typically, they'll just kind of run away. If you're making noise, it's going to be all right. You won't catch them off guard. That's kind of when bad things can happen. And so we were like, okay, maybe we can do this, like trying to hype ourselves up. And so we went to go talk to the park ranger just for like that final reassurance that we wouldn't die on this hike. And she just we told her what the cashier had told us, and she just kind of like giggled, and she's like, we've seen one bear in our park. And we're like, okay, so he was totally just lying to us. Later, we also looked up when cubbing season is, and both of us, like, we don't know a lot about bears, and so I'm sure he just he probably looked at us like some stupid tourists that didn't know what they were doing and was just trying to scare us. But cub season is like in the winter, and then in the spring is when they kind of emerge, which is what I would have assumed. But when somebody that works at a national park tells you something, you kind of take it like as the truth, because you would assume they would want what's best for you. But anyway, so we finally worked up the courage and we went on the Signal Mountain Trail, which was about 6.8 miles in length. And at the top, you had the most beautiful view of the Grand Tetons. And that is something, if you are in the area, I would highly recommend. It was the most beautiful sight we saw the entire trip. So from after that, we drove to the Snake River Lodge and we stayed for the night. So we actually ended up, other than the night when we stayed in our car, we ended up staying at hotels. If we could go back and do it again, I would definitely pack or car camp, which is what I'm sure, I know we'll be back in that area. And so I know that's something that I really want to do. I also know you see a lot of really pretty sights when you're on a campsite. And so I would rather do that than be in a hotel. But for this trip, being newbies to the whole national park thing, we just stayed in hotels because we weren't quite sure where we would want to camp. So we stayed at Snake River Lodge, and then that night we went into Jackson, Wyoming, and we ate at that Roadhouse pub and eatery, walked around, and then got ice cream at Moo's. And I would really recommend that because they use organic everything. Like, all their ingredients are organic. They also source their cream locally, and they don't dilute it with any milk. So it's just heavy cream that they use for their ice cream. And I am lactose intolerant, but I know sometimes when it's a really high quality dairy product, I don't feel as physically ill after eating it. And truthfully, I felt pretty fine. And I got a pistachio, coconut, macadamia nut ice cream. I kind of panicked and decided I definitely would not typically get that, but it was probably one of the best ice creams I've ever had. And so that is a place I would definitely recommend as well. So after that, we drove back to Snake River Lodge, and that was where we were for the night. We woke up, and then we went back into Jackson, and we shopped around, walked a little bit, and went to Cowboy Coffee, which I feel like I've been seeing people all over going to Jackson. And so that was one location I knew I needed to check out. It was delicious. I got a Snickers latte, and then again, we had shopped around, got our souvenirs, and then we ate a quick lunch that we had packed. From there, it was about 11:30, and we started to hike the Snow King summit via the slow trail, and then we went back down on Josie's Ridge. And so that is right outside of Jackson, and that is the trek we took. It's pretty much at an incline the entire time. We were definitely huffing and puffing, but that was also a great hike and very peaceful. Didn't see any wildlife. It was a pretty busy trail. From there, we drove to Jenny Lake Trail, and then we hiked for 7.2 miles there. And we went to the Hidden Falls, which was along the trail. We saw a moose and a deer, and honestly, that was probably the best hike of the entire trip. I was kind of hoping we would see a bear at this point because I'm thinking we're at a national park, and I didn't see one bear. We saw bison, we saw deer, we saw moose, but we didn't see a bear, and that was the one thing we were most scared of. So maybe God was just protecting us and knew that if we saw a bear, we probably wouldn't hike again. But anyway, after that hike, we then drove to West Yellowstone. So that was about a 3-hour trip there. So I'm kind of mapping this out because I want you to also see how much we were able to do. And for me, I got a lot of recommendations, but I was like, okay, what type of order should I do this in? It kind of felt overwhelming, so I wanted to really map this out. So if you're thinking about going on a trip, I'm actually going to copy and paste what I have written out, what we did here, and put it on my blog, and I'll link that in the description of today's episode, just in case you're going back, or if you are going on a vacation there, you have almost an itinerary or guide of which order you should do things in. Obviously, this is my first time there. I'm not saying it's the most perfect itinerary, but it worked really well for us in the short amount of time that we were there. And so after driving to West Yellowstone, that was 3 hours away, we got to West Yellowstone around 9, and then that is when we went and got food, and we booked our hotel for the night. Again, we stayed at a really crappy hotel, and it was $260 something, very expensive hotel, and it was really kind of crappy. It was exactly what we needed, right? It wasn't anything fancy, it was fine, but it's really easy to see how expensive hotel lodging is, especially in an area that's becoming very touristy. And so we again would probably camp if we went back, and that is probably what our plan is for the next time we do go back. From there, the next day we went then through the Yellowstone Park down to Old Faithful. And so we stopped at nearly every sightseeing location because if you're there, you might as well. And we also took Firehole Canyon, which led you along the Madison River. And so we got really beautiful views of waterfalls, and we were kind of in the middle of two mountains, I guess, kind of like I guess you'd call that a valley, right? And I don't know if geographically that's the correct description of what it was, but we just saw a lot of really pretty sights, and we were close to the Madison River rather than being on the highway that most people do travel. And so after that, we went to go see Old Faithful Geyser, and then we walked around the rest of them. And so while we were there, we also saw 4 bison, and Old Faithful was going off 2 times that we were there. We never intentionally sat and watched it, but we walked around to all the different geysers, which are pretty incredible. Highly recommend that. And then after that, we drove to Casper, Wyoming. So we planned on staying in the park for longer, but because we didn't have enough time to go north towards Madison and go to all the hot springs, we rather went down towards Old Faithful because that would kind of segue into leading us home. And so we drove 5 hours then from the park to Casper, Wyoming, and we spent the night there. And then that led us to Sunday, which is when we drove home. And so I share all of this, one, because if you need an itinerary, this is a great one to follow, but also because out of everything I talked about, 2 people traveling, we were there for 4 nights. I would say the trip cost us about $1,000, maybe just slightly more because of the souvenirs we got, but we really wanted to get the most bang for our buck, right? And yes, $1,000 is a lot of money, but again, that's 2 people. And for 4 nights of a trip, I felt like that was pretty inexpensive. Other ways we try to minimize the cost of a trip is we only eat out for our last meal. I've mentioned that multiple times, that we just get supper, and that's the only meal we'll eat out. We also got coffee every morning. That is something we've realized that we really love to do, is get new coffee from different coffee shops that are local. But that's also what we choose to spend our money on instead of alcohol or pop, different beverages you could consume while you're traveling. With our meals, we always typically got water. And then in the morning is when we would kind of indulge, you would say, on coffee. We also packed food for the trip, and we tried to do a lot of activities that are free. So getting into the national park, it does cost $35 per park. So that alone was $70 for both the Grand Teton and Yellowstone. So if you're going to be there for longer amounts of time, that pass lasts you 7 days. So if you're able to spend 2 weeks there, then that's the perfect, that's not very expensive. For us, it was kind of like that is expensive, but also that was where we spent most of our time, most of the days. And so being able to, have that expense, but then everything within the park we didn't cost us any money. We also, next time, will car camp or get a camping spot when we go again. And I would have preferred that, but we kind of planned this trip in less than a day. We decided we wanted to go on a trip before we got our next batch of chickens that we're getting. And so this was kind of that perfect time, and we weren't quite sure if it would work, so we were a little bit last minute. Going back, I would again be a little bit more proactive and just try to do a few more things that would kind of decrease the overall cost of the trip. I'd also recommend that you would take the most fuel efficient car that you own. So our car at some points was getting like 40 miles to the gallon, which is pretty insane. And so with driving, it's a 14-hour trek from West Yellowstone to where we live here in Nebraska. And so to be able to fill up, I think we filled up maybe 4 or 5 times, like that can definitely add up. But if we were taking a less fuel efficient car, the cost would have definitely been more. I would also say when you shop for souvenirs, one thing we did is we went one day, like the night before, we looked around, tried to decide on what we wanted, and then we actually went and purchased it the next day. I am typically a very impulsive person, and I'm trying to work on that just a little bit to be a little bit less impulsive and focus more on buying really high quality things that I really do want. So that is a good way for me to just really think about my purchases, is to think on it overnight, right? So in summary, I know a lot of this was me talking about my trip. I do that because, again, I want you to have an idea of what to do when you go, but also just talking about everything we did. I know that financially, trips can be really stressful. That can weigh on your health, but also I know the benefit of trips for your health, right? The whole time we were there, you almost become numb to how serene the location you're at is. Like, you see these incredible mountains and you almost become immune to it, which is kind of unfortunate because just being outside, I mean, we spent so much of our time outside, and when we come home, we're inside at a desk sitting most of the day. So to be able to go out on a trip and be very physically active and get fresh air, see wildlife, connect with other people, just do all of the hikes that we're not able to do in Nebraska because it's very flat here, it really just made me feel so at peace. And I could definitely notice a decrease in my stress levels. I was also on my phone way less, which is always a perk, right? That's always going to benefit your health, is when you are on technology less and outside more, right? You should be looking at the sun, not directly at the sun, but you should be looking, being outside, you should get sunlight into your eyes more than you get blue light into your eyes, which is coming from your phone, right? When you look at blue light, boom, your stress levels instantly increase, regardless of if you know it. That's what I would refer to as subconscious stress. Whereas when you just get sunlight into your eyes, you'll notice your headaches decrease, your stress levels decrease. You're just genuinely happy and at ease. And it was truly so good for our health. And that's why I really go into such detail about what we did, because I want you to feel like it's possible for you to be able to go out on a trip and gain all of the benefits that come with that, right? And so if you have any questions about the trip, maybe you're wanting to head to Jackson and Yellowstone area, please don't hesitate to reach out to me, because obviously, this trip was really, really incredible, and I am very passionate about talking about it just because we were able to do so much in such a little amount of time. And so if you were like, okay, I only have 3 days, what should I do? I'd love to just talk more about it, because like I said, this is my first time there. I'm no expert, but I do feel like the itinerary we had, we were able to really balance physical activity with eating good food, with getting enough rest, and with taking in some of the touristy attractions. All of that together just felt like a very comfortable balance. All right, so to wrap up today's episode, I'm going to go ahead and close in prayer. So, dear Lord, thank you for this day, and thank you for the person on the other side of this mic that is listening to this podcast. I hope that they feel encouraged and inspired and confident in their ability to go and get away and really focus on themselves and their health and building the relationships with the people around them, and that they're able to find the time, or maybe the time is opened up for them to get away and really just take time for themselves to reset and get outside in nature. I just want to thank you for the beautiful scenery that you provide around us, and that I just continue to not take that for granted and truly admire the work that you've done. When you're able to just be outside in nature, it's so peaceful and it's so calming, and I want to thank you for that experience. And I just ask again that whoever is listening to this podcast, that they just feel that push to, even if it's just getting outside of their home, that they're able to get outside today, move their body, and really just see the world around them with a different view, a positive outlook, and that they are able to just take in all the little and beautiful things that are happening around them all the time. And that I just continue to remember that we don't have to travel 14 hours away to admire what you've created around us, and that can be as little as going for a walk outside with no technology, and that I just feel at peace with that in this week ahead. Again, thank you for the opportunity to just talk openly here and connect with other people through this podcast. Amen. All right, so if you enjoyed this podcast, again, feel free to share it with a friend. Send this episode to a friend you love. If you want to follow along with me on social media, you can find me at Bailey with 2 Y's and Teton with 2 N's on Instagram, TikTok, Lemon8, Facebook, basically everywhere. So with that, I will talk to you next Wednesday, wishing you a great rest of your week and a restful weekend. Bye.